Welcome to SkillCap's Demonology Warlock Starter Guide. In this video, we'll be taking a look at how Demo Warlocks are shaping up in Dragonflight by analyzing what's new and how their playstyle has changed. We'll then cover what the best demo races are, while also covering which PvP talents you should be taking and when. After that, we'll go over how you should be gearing, including what your stat priority is and what pieces of gear you should be looking to pick up, and how you should gem and enchant them. We'll then finish up with a breakdown of the most important Demo Warlock macros. By following along closely, you'll learn how to correctly build your character and have all the necessary information to give yourself the best chance to get a head start on everyone else in Dragonflight. And while this guide does a great job of getting you started, you're missing out big time if you're not already a member over at our platform, SkillCap. We work with the absolute best players possible to give you all the information you need to gain a ton of ratings stupidly fast in Dragonflight. For example, to make our damage course for Demo Warlock, we worked with Gaelu, who's not only a rank 1 EU wizard, but has also made appearances at BlizzCon. With Gaelu's expertise, we specifically designed our demo damage course to simplify the seemingly complex rotation of the spec, including tutorials on how to burst with every possible build. It didn't stop there though, as we even developed videos for our new Master in Minutes series that teach you some advanced tricks that you won't find anywhere else. These include tricks that only the best players know about and normally require years of high-level experience to understand. But with our binge-worthy courses, all of this pro knowledge can become yours within a matter of minutes. This, alongside our comprehensive crowd control and survival guides, it's a no-brainer to join SkillCap this expansion if you want to be light years ahead of everyone else who doesn't have access to our courses. We're also super excited to announce our brand new article site for Dragonflight, where you can find a written version of this guide. In the article, we've conveniently provided the export link for you to import the talent build we cover in this guide. We also have all the macros listed for you to easily copy and create in-game. We'll be keeping the article updated throughout the expansion with the most recent talents and everything else that the best players in the world are using. So be sure to visit the link in the description, bookmark it, and check back often to keep yourself up to date with the most recent build. Alright, let's get back to the video. To kick things off, let's focus on how Demonology Warlocks are looking in Dragonflight, starting with what's new. Overall, Demonology has access to a very similar toolkit to the one it had in Shadowlands, with most of the core gameplay remaining the same. The main differences going into Dragonflight are in the form of some welcomed new additions, coupled with the flexibility in the new talent system, which now opens up the opportunity to take the best parts of a lot of previous builds and mix and match them. Hands down, one of the most exciting new additions is the new talent of Gul'dan's Ambition, which grants us a new empowered demon once Nether Portal expires. This Pit Lord lasts for 10 seconds and can deal some ridiculous damage based on how many pets you summoned during your Nether Portal. And with this being viable in PvP, it plays nicely into the class fantasy of Demonology Warlock, and you really do feel like you're summoning that demon zoo. Another great new addition is Soulburn. This new in-cap talent in the Warlock tree allows you to now utilize shards for utility purposes, which includes improving your demonic circle by attaching a freedom effect and movement speed increase, improving your gateway to make it instant, which solves the issue of never getting stopped on your gateway summon at the start of arena games, and then you can even Soulburn Healthstone to increase the healing and increase your maximum health. But let's talk about the general playstyle and what to expect from Demonology in Dragonflight. Well, overall, like we mentioned, if you enjoyed Shadowlands Demonology Warlock, then you're going to have a good time in Dragonflight, as the playstyle remains inherently the same. And depending on your build of choice, you can fill pretty much any role. Be that the very high sustained damage with a build entirely focused around Doom and passive damage coming from Dreadstalkers, Imps, and your Felguard, or take a more setup and burst approach with the old Demon Bolt build, where you're still doing very sustained damage but also have the ability to burst with some hard-hitting Demon Bolts. Or even play into the class fantasy by selecting a more pet-oriented build with either a focus on Pit Lord damage or Tyrant damage. So there's without a doubt a lot of options on the damage front. And if what you enjoyed from Demonology was annoying your opponents, then you can still expect a heavy emphasis on crowd control and disruption, with familiar curses like tongues, weakness, and Exhaustion being available through talents, alongside the ability to pick up Amplify Curse on top of it, not to mention still having access to Fear, Mortal Coil, Axe Toss, Spell Lock, Shadow Fury, and even Grimoire of Felguard Stun. Yeah, so if just summoning a horde of nameplates on your opponent's screen wasn't enough annoyance, you've definitely got the crowd control and disruption to still make your opponents hate you. Next up, let's get into race selection. Finally, Blizzard's making some indirect changes to racials in Dragonflight, meaning we can finally break free of the orc and human meta. Or, well, at least maybe for the other specs. We can hope. Because for Demonology, the best race still remains to be orc. Despite the hardiness racial being indirectly toned down with the introduction of the 2-set PvP trinket alongside crafted gear, means we can reach 15% passive CC reduction. That doesn't stack with hardiness. It does still, however, mean we gain up to 10% passive stun reduction, which is obviously still strong. But the main selling point of Orc is now definitely the combination of command for that passive boost to pet damage, and Blood Fury for the on-demand burst. For alternatives, Human still remains to be the most versatile option on Alliance, given that again, the old Relentless Trinket is now provided as part of the 2 PvP Trinket set bonus at 10% effectiveness, which means this opens up the option to drop Medallion in favor of playing with 2 offensive trinkets, or even an offensive and defensive trinket, all while still having access to a stun removal in the form of Will to Survive. However, you do have a few other very strong choices whose strength vary depending on the meta. Both Dwarves and Dark Iron Dwarves remain to be a strong pick, especially if we end up seeing a Feral Druid and Assassination Rogue dominated meta, as both Stoneform and Fireblood are excellent cooldowns for reducing incoming damage, with the former being a more defensive pick while the latter can help with offense. Now let's get into the good stuff. Talents, as there's quite a lot to talk about given the huge revamp to the talent system in Dragonflight. I mean, I think it's fair to say we all had the same experience, logging into the game, opening up the talent tree, seeing this, and immediately getting overwhelmed and wondering to ourselves what on earth we were looking at. The way we're going to explain how to choose your talents is by starting with what we're calling your core build before adding and discussing your optional talents, both in the Warlock and Demonology trees. We'll begin with the core Warlock tree talents, with this build being essentially the talents you're going to want to be using in 99% of your games, either because they're too good or because you're required to spend a certain number of points before moving on to the next section of the tree, and the selected talents are just the least worst option. So, in almost all situations, you want to make sure you always have every talent selected in green, which leaves us with 2 points free, which we'll talk about shortly, but for now let's talk about the noteworthy talents from this core. First of all, we've got Curse of Enfeeblement, which grants us access to Curse of Tongues and Exhaustion, coupled up with Amplify Curse, which is no longer a PvP talent. So in a spec like Demonology, where we're very reliant on certain PvP talents, it's fantastic that now we can easily pick this up for that increased slow or cast speed reduction. Something else which is very beneficial for Demonology is the vast amount of pet damage increase passives that you're able to pick up. So talents like Wrathful Minion, which increases your pet damage every time you get a shard, Demonic Inspiration, which gives your pet attack speed when you again fill a shard, and even Grimoire of Synergy to buff both your own and your pet's damage. The best part of this tree though is definitely the new addition of Soulburn, which gives us the ability to now spin shards for the different types of utility. This talent is so strong, in fact, we have an entire Master in Minutes dedicated to its uses, so be sure to check that out. Inside of this core, we also have a few choices we can swap between based on the matchup at hand, such as Ichor of Devils or Frequent Donor. Ichor of Devils reduces the amount of health sacrificed by Dark Pact by 5%, meaning when you press it, you'll be gaining the same shield but require less health to do so, making it great against sustained damage. Whereas Frequent Donor reduces the cooldown by 15 seconds, making it an option into more setup-oriented compositions. Another choice is between Mortal Coil or Howl of Terror. Mortal Coil is the most commonly used of the two, giving you that added crowd control on a different diminishing return which can be used to survive, peel, or set up kills. On the other hand, Howl of Terror can be good in matchups where enemies are constantly stacked behind pillars, or specifically against a setup composition like Rogue Mage, where a well-timed Howl of Terror can immediately peel a setup. Then the final choice is between Strength of Will or Dark Accord, both of which interact with your unending resolve. Strength of Will is great into high burst classes, increasing your unending resolve damage reduction by an additional 15%, giving you a 40% damage reduction. Alternatively, Dark Accord flat out reduces the cooldown by 45 seconds, which can help against more sustained damage output. In addition to the core talents selected in green, you can also choose from any of the talents we've highlighted in red, which you can swap between based on your build, composition, or matchup. Starting from the top, we've got the optional talent of Banish. This is a very strong option into Demonology and Destruction Warlocks, giving you the ability to banish pets like Fell Hunter to remove Spell Lock, Felguard to reduce damage and remove the Warlock's ability to Axe Toss, or even summon demons like Demonic Tyrant or the Pit Lord from Gul'dan's Ambition. Best of all, when banishing a demon, you'll even be removing Soul Link, making the Warlock take more damage. Additionally, you can even pick up Greater Banish, allowing you to banish undead enemies, which has some niche uses into either Unholy Death Knights to counteract Gargoyle, Raise Abomination, or their empowered pet from Dark Transformation, or even potentially against hunters when playing with an undead pet to remove their ability to use Roar of Sacrifice. If you wanted to use these 2 points to get more damage output, then the most common variation is to put them into Soul Conduit for the chance at some additional shard generation, which is especially good in our more setup-oriented builds. Whereas if you need more survivability, you can instead opt for Fell Synergy to empower your Soul Leech, and then put the other point into either Resolute Barrier to gain access to a shorter ending resolve cooldown, or even Shadow Flame, which provides you with a 70% frontal cone slow on a 15-second cooldown, making it very strong into matchups where you want to be constantly kiting to reduce your damage output. But overall, this leaves your final Warlock talent build looking like this. But again, each of these talents highlighted in red are viable, so feel free to play around with your optional talents to find the build you prefer. Next up, let's get to the Demonology side of the tree by starting off again with what we consider a good core. Again, you want to pick every talent we've highlighted in green in almost all situations. This leaves us with 5 points that we can use to determine what route we want to take with this. But same as before, let's cover the highlights of this core. This core is built around picking up all the important must-have abilities while picking up strong passives to empower your Dreadstalkers and Felguard. So we have Soul Strike giving us an easy way to generate shards and deal some on-demand damage with our Felguard, Demonic Strength, which is surprisingly one of our biggest cooldowns and our main source of burst damage, causing our Felguard to do an improved version of Fellstorm for 400% added damage, which can deal ridiculous burst on a short cooldown. Then we've got Doom for the sustained damage output and shard generation, which is something we will never want to be without. Grimoire of Felguard to get you that extra pet damage and stun, which makes locking down the target and bursting a lot easier. And lastly, Demonic Tyrant, which even if you're not making a build focused around its damage, it still provides a decent cooldown that extends the duration and buffs the damage of your pets. Okay, so let's get into the task of assigning these last 5 points, all of which drastically alter our playstyle and overall goal of our builds. These points can realistically go anywhere on the tree, with all of the talents highlighted in red being viable options. Where you place these 5 points can be broken up into 4 different builds, each encompassing different goals. Starting off with the current go-to build, which has a heavy focus on just sustained, consistent high pressure coming from Dreadstalkers and Felguard, picking up all the talents highlighted in red. For this spec, we'll be slotting points into Kazzak's Final Curse, which just passively increases your Doom damage for every active demon you have, alongside also picking up Shadow's Bite for even more passive damage coming from Demon Bolt, and rounding out the spec by putting an additional point in Imp Gang Boss, with the final point not being too important. We suggest putting it into Sacrifice Souls. Next build, picking up all the talents highlighted in red, is focused around huge burst coming from the new Pit Lord demon. Although this is very high burst, it requires a lot of casting and setup and can be easily countered if your enemy has an abundance of mobility or roots. For this, we're going to be putting those 5 optional talent points into Imp Gang Boss to allow us to access Nether Portal for the additional demons. And then Ner'zhul's Volition for even more demons, and of course, allowing us to pick up the end cap of Gul'dan's Ambition. It's this talent which summons the Pit Lord once your portal expires. The power of this build relies on summoning an abundance of demons during your Nether Portal window in order to maximize the power of your Pit Lord for 10 seconds of ridiculous burst. Our next build, again, taking all the talents highlighted in red, is a take on the old Demon Bolt burst build from Shadowlands, although now having slightly less burst will make up for it with a much higher emphasis on sustained damage. One thing to note is that we're going to be taking 1 point out of the core talent of Fell Might, highlighted in blue, to make this happen. The key to this build is the combination of Power Siphon to grant you on-demand demon bolts while also empowering their damage. Then combining that with Fell Covenant, essentially acting as the old Bale Spider legendary, increasing demon bolts' massive damage after 4 Shadow Bolts, giving us a build that not only does decent consistent damage, but can also offer very strong burst with minimal setup during goes. Last of all, we've got the standard Tyrant build, although this is much weaker than its former Shadowlands rendition. This is much more reliable than the Pit Lord alternative, requiring slightly less setup on a much lower cooldown. This build picks up the Soulbound Tyrant talent for that on-demand shard generation during your Tyrant window, as well as also further increasing your Tyrant's damage for each imp and demon that you have active from Reign of Tyranny, resulting in a pet build that still offers very high damage with decent setup required, but while being slightly more reliable and easy to execute. So with the new talent trees and builds covered, let's now cover PvP talents. From the 3 PvP talents you get to choose, there's 2 you want to take pretty much every single game. Master Summoner is the most important, and all this does is make your Call Dreadstalkers instant, which in PvP makes our rotation that much more fluid, and you should never in any circumstance play without this. And alongside Master Summoner, the other talent you never want to be without is Call Fellhunter. Without this, we as Demonology don't have an interrupt. So, unless it's some rare situation where you're facing something like a double warrior in 2v2, you're going to want to have this at all times. The third talent's a little more open to variation, although if you can, you should always try and play Fell Obelisk. This acts as a very strong offensive cooldown for both yourself and all of your pets by giving increased cast and attack speed, but can often be countered easily if your opponents are killing it. Otherwise, if you need some added defense for a specific matchup, you can look to pick up either Gateway Mastery, providing you and your team with a longer distance gateway that you can take more often, or even Shadow Rift, providing you with the option to displace melee to peel, or even set up kills by sending them to the location of your demonic circle. Lastly, the only other option to consider is Nether Ward, that can be used to either reflect damage or give the ability to more easily cast when facing caster cleaves. Next up, we're going to be covering gear, but before we do, if you want to see the rest of our class course, it's only available at skillcap.com. There, you can access our premium damage rotation and bursting guides, alongside our defensive play and crowd control courses, which were designed by some of the best WoW players in the world. And if that wasn't enough, we even offer site-exclusive arena commentaries, where you can get detailed matchup strategies to start playing just like a pro. And with a rating gain guarantee, you have nothing to lose. So check out skillcap.com today. Up next, we'll be getting into your stat priority and how you should be gearing. Starting off with your stat priority, you want to focus on getting as much versatility as you can, up to at least 30%. This will eventually be happening automatically through PvP gearing, as you'll be using mostly items which have versatility on them. After that, you're going to be wanting to prioritize haste above all else. Haste is great as it increases your cast speed and reduces your global cooldown. Mastery is slightly weaker than haste, but still not terrible, as it increases the damage done by all your demons. A critical strike, however, should always be avoided. And while you can initially gear up through multiple sources, you'll eventually land on a full set of 424 Conquest gear. The only exception will be the use of a crafted 424 belt called Infurious Binding of Gesticulation, which can be purchased from a tailor through work orders and is important to obtain due to the 5% reduction in crowd control effects. Now, while we just mentioned that you'll be gearing through PvP, you do still have the option of converting your PvP gear into your tier set akin to Shadowlands. For Demonology, you should aim to do this as soon as possible, as both the 2-piece and 4-piece are incredibly strong. The 2 set especially, as it increases the damage of your Fellstorm and Demon Bolt by a static amount, and with Fellstorm being centric to your burst damage, this is a must-have. And although you'll slightly hinder your stat priorities due to the pre-assigned stats, the 4-piece is currently still worth it. We suggest picking up all the tier pieces aside from the chest in order to still get the most optimal stats, as when equipped, it provides you with a 50-50 chance for Demon Bolt to make Hand of Gul'dan instant and deal 150% increased damage. As for trinkets, there's a handful of options, each of which are viable. If you're not playing a human, then you'll always want to use the Gladiator's Medallion. This can be paired with either a defensive or offensive option. For the latter, you'll want an insignia for the very strong proc and large increase to passive haste, and for the former, an emblem or battle master to give you that additional defensive tool. Whereas if you're human, it opens up a lot of variation. You could potentially go full offense and play both a badge and insignia, providing you with the random proc and on-demand damage, or swap out the badge for an emblem and get the best of both worlds. Otherwise, exactly like any other race, you can just run an insignia and medallion, or emblem and medallion depending on the matchup. Moving into gems and enchants, this one's pretty straightforward, so let's go over things quick. As we should be eventually passively reaching over 30% versatility just through gearing, you'll then want to prioritize haste wherever possible. If you're below 30% versatility, however, swap these haste gems and enchants to the versatility equivalent. Anyway, you'll be using a tiered medallion setting to get up to 3 gem slots in your neck, which you'll fill with the highest quality haste gem, the quick Ephemerald or even energized Malachite, to get that extra little bit of versatility depending on your stats. You'll also then want to enchant your rings with the highest quality Devotion of Haste or Devotion of Versatility. Next, there's a handful of speed enchants which are important for your ability to kite or chase inside of Arena. These go on Bracers and Cloak, where you'll want the highest quality Writ of Speed, and Boots, where we suggest picking up Planesrunner's Breeze. You could also, however, opt for Watcher's Loam for the added stamina. Then for your chest, you'll also want to pick up the Waking Stats enchant, giving you a large boost to Intellect. And for legs, you'll want to pick up Frozen Spell Thread from a tailor for the increase to Intellect and Stamina. Leaving us just with Weapon, where we suggest picking up Wafting Devotion for the large increase to Haste and Speed. The final section in this starter course we'll be covering is macros. As Demonology is a pet class, you're going to be required to have a few macros to efficiently control your pet. You're going to need a way to send your pet to attack your target and also your focus target, as well as a way to bring your pet back by putting it on follow. This is done by the 3 macros that you're going to see on the screen right now, but can also be achieved with the exception of the focus pet attack by binding pet follow and pet attack directly on the pet bar. We highly suggest having a separate bind for pet attack and to avoid putting pet attack into abilities, as that way you can have your pet on different targets to either stop drinks or spread pressure. You'll also need a way to use your crowd control onto additional targets, and this could be done via Focus or Arena 123 macros, or even a combination of both by just replacing the spell name text you see on the screen now with the name of the ability. And once you've decided on the type of macro you prefer to use, you'll need them for Fear, Axe Toss, Mortal Coil, Curse of Exhaustion, Curse of Tongues, Curse of Weakness, and Call Fellhunter, which is your interrupt. We also suggest making an At Cursor macro for your Fell Obelisk, as this will eliminate the need for an extra click during your burst windows. If you're comfortable in doing so, you can also do the same for Shadow Fury, again removing the need for an extra click when you're wanting to stun your opponents. And last but not least, whilst not technically a macro per se, We also highly suggest binding both Target Arena 123 and Focus Arena 123 inside of the key binding options to make your targeting a lot more optimal. We've put Control 123 and Shift 123, but this is, of course, personal preference, so use whichever binds you find comfortable. This may take some time at first to get used to, but it's definitely gonna improve your gameplay tenfold. Alright guys, that's it for this one. As a reminder, don't forget to visit and bookmark the written version of this guide linked in the description that we'll be keeping updated throughout the expansion over on our brand new article site. And if you're looking to gain a ton of rating stupidly fast in Dragonflight, head over to skillcap.com right now and check out our premium courses risk-free. That's right, we're the only service that dares to literally guarantee at least 400 rating while actively using our service. And if you don't pay. Simple as that. As always though, we want to thank you all for watching and we'll see you in the next one.